Have you ever found yourself dreaming about owning a slice of paradise? Maybe a stunning villa or perhaps a sleek condo somewhere like Phuket. And just so we're clear, we'll be saying Phuket today.
It's a common dream, definitely. Those turquoise waters, the lush landscapes, it's very appealing.
It really is. But then you start looking into it, and the whole idea of actually owning property there as a foreigner,
No.
well, it can suddenly feel like you're trying to navigate this really complex maze.
Uh-huh. It can seem that way at first glance.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, trying to understand the legal side of property ownership for foreigners in Phuket, Thailand. Our mission really is to cut through some of that legal jargon, pull out the most important bits of information, and hopefully make what seems like a maze feel, well, incredibly clear for you.
That's the goal.
And our main source for this is a really detailed legal guide. It's called Phuket Property for Foreigners, a legal guide, and it's put together by Ocean Worldwide.
Ah, yes, Ocean Worldwide. They've been around for a while.
Exactly. They're a luxury real estate agency based right there in Phuket since, I think, 2004. Their director, Sandra O'Neill, has apparently helped literally thousands of families and investors over the years. They really focus on that high-end residential market in Phuket and also Koh Samui.
Right. And what's interesting and what the guide highlights is that while Thai property law might look complicated from the outside, once you grasp the core principles, it's actually remarkably clear. Our aim today is really to give you that understanding, help you see the potential pitfalls, avoid them, and basically make really informed decisions.
Okay, and the core idea we need to get our heads around right away, the sort of fundamental point, is that foreigners can buy property in Phuket, but maybe not always own the land itself directly. Is that right?
That's the crux of it, yes.
Yeah.
So let's unpack that a bit.
Okay, so starting with the basics. Generally speaking, as a foreigner, you can't just go and buy a piece of land in Thailand in your own name.
Correct. That's the general rule under the Land Code Act.
But, and this is the important, but you can own the structures, things like condominium units or even entire buildings.
That's the key distinction the guide really hammers home. It uses a neat analogy. Think of it like owning your car outright, but you're renting the parking space it sits on.
Ah, okay. I like that.
You have full legal ownership, full control over the actual physical structure, the condo, the building, but the land underneath. Well, that operates under a different set of rules. Getting that separation clear is step one for navigating the Phuket market.
That visual really helps. So why these rules? What's the thinking behind it? It feels like a balancing act.
It absolutely is. Thailand wants to protect Thai national interests, primarily control over land. But at the same time, they actively welcome foreign investment.
Right, because it brings in money, creates jobs.
Precisely. Foreign property investment is a huge economic driver. It injects capital, boosts local economies. So the government has created these specific legal pathways for foreigners to invest safely. It's designed to be a win-win. Foreign money helps Thailand grow, but ultimate control over land stays with Thai nationals. The guide really explains this dynamic well.
Which brings us back to the point that getting good legal advice right from the start is just crucial. You need someone guiding you to make sure everything is smooth and, more importantly, secure.
Non-negotiable, really.
Okay, so we understand that core distinction, owning the building, maybe not the land. How do foreigners actually do it then? The guide lays out a few common routes. Maybe the most straightforward one is condominium freehold ownership.
Yes, that's often the simplest path. It means direct legal ownership of the actual condo unit itself, like owning an apartment back home.
And this is governed by a specific law.
It is, the Thailand Condominium Act. And here's a critical detail, something you absolutely must check before you even think about buying the foreign ownership quota.
Okay, what's that?
The law states that a maximum of 49% of the total registered floor area within a condominium building can be earned by foreigners. So at least 51% must be owned by Thais or Thai companies.
49%, that's quite specific.
It is, and it's not just a rule on paper, it impacts the market. In popular buildings, that foreign quota can fill up fast.
Meaning fewer units available for direct foreign purchase?
Exactly. It also means developers need Thai buyers too, which can sometimes influence how things are priced or marketed. And another key thing the guide mentions, not every apartment block you see is legally registered as a condominium under this act. So verifying that specific registration is step one.
Got it. And financially, it's not just about having the money, right? You have to prove where it came from.
Yes, that's a huge part of the process for freehold condos. You need to show the funds came from outside Thailand. You bring in foreign currency, it gets exchanged officially into Thai baht by a Thai bank, and then you need the paperwork.
Like the FETF form, foreign exchange transaction form.
That's the one. Or similar bank documents proving the transfer and conversion. You have to present this to the land department when you register the ownership. They're very strict about this. Need that clear paper trail showing the funds originated abroad. Without it, you simply can't register the condo in your name under that foreign freehold quota. It stops people using local funds to get around the rules.
Okay, that makes sense. So beyond buying a condo directly, what's another common way, especially if you're looking at, say, a villa or maybe even just land? The guide talks about leasehold agreements.
Ah, yes, leaseholds. Very common, especially for villas. The guide calls it something like a prepaid tenancy contract, which is a pretty good way to think
A
about it.
prepaid tenancy. Yeah.
Basically, you're securing long-term use of the property, often the land the villa sits on, without actually owning the land itself.
Hmm.
Under current Thai law, the maximum initial lease term you can register is 30 years.
Just 30 years. That doesn't sound very long term if you're building or buying a house.
Well, this is where it gets interesting. What developers, especially in the luxury villa market in Phuket, often do is structure agreements with options to extend. The standard practice is often aiming for a total of 90 years.
How does that work?
It's usually structured as an initial 30-year lease, plus contractual options to renew for 2 further 30-year periods. So 30 plus 30 plus 30.
I see. But are those renewals guaranteed?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The guide is careful here. Those extensions depend heavily on the exact wording in the original lease agreement, and potentially on future changes in the law. They aren't always automatic or absolutely guaranteed, though reputable developers structure them robustly.
So even though it's a lease, it sounds like it has some real legal teeth if done right.
It does. A properly drafted leasehold agreement, especially when registered with the land department, creates a recognized legal interest against the property's title deed, meaning it's legally binding, even if the person who owns the land sells it to someone else during your lease term. Your right to use the land continues. It's also generally transferable. And the guide makes a good point about including a succession clause, so the lease rights can potentially pass to your heirs.
Okay. But again, the fine print matters immensely.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
The guide stresses this repeatedly. Get independent legal advice. Don't just rely on the seller's or developer's lawyer. You need someone looking out solely for your interests, making sure you understand every clause in that lease contract.
Right. Now, what about those who want? Well, maybe more control, particularly over the land itself. Or perhaps are making a bigger investment. The guide details another strategy, setting up a Thai company to acquire the property.
Yes, this is often described as a common workaround, though you have to be careful with that term for the restrictions on direct foreign land ownership. Typically, it involves setting up a Thai private limited company.
Okay, and how does that work legally?
The key legal requirement is the shareholding structure. For a company to be considered Thai, and thus eligible to own land, at least 51% of its shares must be held by Thai nationals.
51% Thai-owned.
Correct. And you also need a minimum of 3 shareholders in total for a private limited company. The legal logic is, the company is a Thai legal entity, therefore it can own the land.
So if the foreign investor only holds, say, 49% of the shares, how do they protect their investment and actually control the property? That seems like the main concern.
It is, and there are mechanisms for this which the guide outlines, things like detailed shareholder agreements that spell out rights and obligations. You can also structure things like weighted voting rights, where the minority foreign shareholder might have more say on certain key decisions than their share percentage suggests.
Like a veto power on selling the land, perhaps?
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
appointing the company directors. If the foreign investor controls the board of directors, they effectively control the company's actions, including managing the property.
But this sounds like it could be.
It requires careful legal structuring. And here's a really important point the guide emphasizes. Thai authorities are increasingly scrutinizing these setups, specifically looking for what they call nominee arrangements.
Nominee arrangements, meaning
Situations where the Thai shareholders aren't genuine, active partners in the company, but are essentially just holding shares on behalf of the foreigner to meet the 51% rule. They have no real investment or interest.
like they're just names on paper.
Precisely. If the authorities suspect it's just a structure purely to get around land laws, with no real Thai involvement or genuine business purpose, it could face legal challenges down the line. The guide raises this as a serious consideration. Are the Thai shareholders truly engaged? Is the company structure legitimate?
So relying on nominee shareholders is risky.
Increasingly so, yes.
Yeah.
Using this company structure method needs very careful planning And again, top-notch legal advice to ensure it's robust and defensible, and that all the safeguards like voting rights are legally sound.
Okay, that's a really important nuance. Let's dig into some other specifics. There's often confusion about villas. People sometimes think foreigners just can't own a villa in Phuket at all. But the guide clarifies this.
Yes, it does. Foreigners absolutely can legally own the physical villa structure itself, separate from the land it's built on.
So back to that car and parking space idea. You own the bricks and mortar.
Exactly. And for this to be fully legally recognized, the ownership of that villa, that building, needs to be properly registered at the land department. There's a formal process for this, which documents the transfer and clearly separates the ownership of the structure from the ownership of the land.
And then for detached properties like villas, the land underneath is almost always handled through that long-term lease we talked about earlier.
That's the typical setup, yes. Which means you really need to pay attention to the terms of that land lease. Things like who's responsible for maintenance, what are the exact terms for renewal, any restrictions on how you can use the property. A solid registered lease is vital to protect your investment in the villa sitting on top of it.
Makes sense. Now, regarding the land ownership restrictions themselves, the guide is pretty firm on the general rule.
Very firm. It reiterates the general prohibition under Thai law. Foreigners cannot directly own land.
Right.
And it warns that trying to find loopholes or use unofficial means can lead to serious trouble. We're talking potentially hefty fines or even imprisonment under Section 111 of the Land Code Act. Up to 2 years, apparently.
Wow, okay. So stick to the proper channels. Is there any exception for direct land ownership?
The guide mentions one, but stresses it's very limited and rarely used in practice. It's Section 96 buys of the Land Code. It theoretically allows a foreigner to own up to one ray of land that's about 1,600 square meters, or roughly zero point 0.4 acres purely for residential use.
Okay, but what's the catch?
A huge catch. It requires a massive investment, specifically 40 million Thai baht, which is over $1 million US, brought into Thailand and invested in specific types of government bonds or Board of Investment, BOI, approved assets that are deemed beneficial to the Thai economy.
40 million baht.
Yes. And even then, it's not automatic. You need special permission from the Minister of the Interior. And crucially, the guide points out that land acquired this way generally cannot be transferred or inherited. It's extremely restrictive.
So for 99.9% of people dreaming of a holiday home, this isn't really a viable path.
Not at all. As the guide implies, focus on the established, clear routes, like condos or leaseholds or properly structured companies. Much safer.
What about foreign companies, though? Are there special rules for corporations?
Yes, there are some specific avenues for foreign businesses, but again, these are quite targeted. The guide mentions exemptions under the Board of Investment, BOI. If a foreign company makes a very large investment in Thailand that significantly benefits the economy, the BOI might grant permission to own land necessary for that business operation.
So for building a factory or something.
Exactly. Similarly, companies operating within designated industrial estates under the Industrial Estate Authority of Thailand, IE8, might be allowed to own land within that estate, and there are specific provisions under the Petroleum Act for companies involved in exploration or production.
But these are all tied to the business activity, right? Not for building condos to sell or for residential purposes.
Correct. The land ownership permission is typically limited to the duration the business is operating, and for the specific purpose it was granted. It's about facilitating major industrial or economic projects, not general real estate investment for individuals. Definitely not a loophole for buying your dream villa.
Right. Okay, another area that often causes confusion: inheritance. What happens if a foreigner inherits property in Thailand? The guide mentions complexities.
Yes, it's not straightforward. While Thai law does technically allow foreigners to inherit property, including land, the actual ability to hold ownership of that inherited land is still generally restricted.
So you might inherit it on paper, but
you usually can't keep it long-term if it's land. Often, permission from the Minister of Interior is required, which isn't easily granted. The guide clarifies that references in Thai law to foreign land inheritance often presuppose a treaty exists, allowing it, and currently Thailand doesn't have such treaties with any country for general land ownership by inheritance.
So it's complex. What about inheriting from a spouse? Say, a foreign wife inherits land from her Thai husband.
That's a specific scenario the guide addresses. In that case, the foreign spouse who inherits the land is usually required by law to dispose of it, meaning sell it within 1 year from the date they acquire it.
1 year? That seems quite strict.
It is, but the important point is that the proceeds from that sale belong entirely to the foreign heir. It's a mechanism to uphold the principle of restricting foreign land ownership, preventing it from being passed on indefinitely through marriage, while still respecting the inheritor's financial rights.
I see. So they get the value, just not the land itself long term.
Precisely. And again, the guide stresses getting legal advice here is vital because specific conditions for selling the land and how Thai family law interacts with inheritance, especially regarding property acquired during the marriage, can be quite nuanced.
Okay, definitely noted. Let's shift focus slightly to the nuts and bolts, the financial and legal framework around these deals. Financially, we mentioned the need to bring money in from overseas.
Yes, worth reiterating, it's absolutely critical for registering a foreign-owned property, especially a freehold condo. Transfer the funds in foreign currency, get it exchanged to Thai baht through an official Thai bank, keep all the paperwork the FETF or equivalent bank credit advice.
And the banks are checking this closely.
Very closely. They have strict anti-money laundering regulations to comply with, so expect them to ask questions about the source of your funds. It's standard procedure.
And then there are the inevitable fees and taxes when you buy. The guide gives a breakdown. What can people typically expect?
Okay, the main ones are, there's a transfer fee, which is usually 2% of the property's government-assessed value.
2%.
Okay, then there's stamp duty, which is 0.5% of the assessed value. However, you only pay this if the transaction is exempt from specific business tax.
What's specific business tax?
That's a tax of 3.3% calculated on either the assessed value or the actual selling price, whichever's higher. It typically applies if the seller has owned the property for less than 5 years.
Ah, so it's kind of like an anti-flipping tax.
Sort of, yes. If the seller has owned it longer than 5 years, or if it's their primary residence for at least a year, they're usually exempt from SBT, and then the 0.5% stamp duty applies instead. There's also withholding tax, which varies depending on whether the seller is a company or an individual and how long they've owned it.
So quite a few different potential costs.
Definitely. And the guide makes a good point. Who pays these fees and taxes? The buyer, the seller, or split 50-50 can often be negotiated as part of the deal.
Ah, okay, so it's not always fixed who pays what.
Not always. Getting professional advice on the total tax implications before you sign is really important so you know the true cost of acquisition and can potentially negotiate those closing costs.
Good tip. Now, beyond the main ownership types like freehold and leasehold, the guide mentions some other, maybe more specialized, property rights. Can you explain usufruct and superficies? They sound quite formal.
They're quite specific legal rights, yes. Think of a usufruct like this. It gives someone the right to use and benefit from a property owned by someone else. Maybe use the house, collect rent from it, or harvest fruit from the garden.
So you can use it and get income from it, but you don't own it.
Exactly. It's often granted for a specific period, like the lifetime of the person receiving the right, or for a maximum of 30 years if granted to a company. It's personal and usually can't be inherited, often used in family situations.
Okay. And superficies.
Superficies is even more specific. It grants you the legal right to own buildings, trees, or other structures on land that belongs to someone else.
So you could own the house, but someone else owns the land it's sitting on, separate from a lease.
Precisely. It legally separates ownership of the structure from ownership of the land, like our earlier analogy, but formalized differently than just owning a building combined with a land lease. Both usufruct and superficies need to be formally registered at the land department to be legally valid and enforceable against third parties.
Got it. And the guide also mentions habitation and servitude.
Right. Habitation is simpler. It's just the basic right for a person and their family to live in a property owned by someone else. It's purely for dwelling, you can't rent it out, and it's non-transferable. Think of it like being granted the right to live in a guest house on someone's estate.
Okay. And servitude.
Servitude is a right that benefits one piece of land over another adjacent or nearby piece of land. The classic example is a right-of-way. If your Phuket dream villa is landlocked, a registered servitude could grant you the legal right to cross your neighbor's property to reach the road.
Ah, like an easement.
Exactly. Similar concept. It attaches to the land, so even if your neighbor sells, the new owner is still bound by the servitude. It protects the utility or access of your property.
And there was one more relatively new one mentioned, sapping sith.
Yes, sapping sith. This is a newer right, introduced relatively recently. It basically grants the holder the right to use an immovable property for a period of up to 30 years. It's registered on the title deed and considered a real right, which can offer slightly different protections than a standard lease in certain situations.
Better than a lease, then.
Not necessarily better, just different. It's still fundamentally contract-based. The guide notes that renewal isn't automatic, and crucially, agreements about compensation for any improvements you make might not always be enforceable against a new landowner if the property is sold. So it has nuances,
And like the others.
must be registered to be effective. The common theme with all these rights, usufruct, superficies, habitation, servitude, sapping sith, is that registration at the land department is key. And understanding the precise limitations and benefits requires careful legal advice tailored to your specific situation. They aren't one-size-fits-all solutions.
Absolutely. Okay, just to wrap up the legal framework, let's quickly recap the main laws that govern all this in Phuket, the ones the guide focuses on.
Sure. There are really three main pillars you need to be aware of. First, the Thailand Land Code Act. That's the big one that primarily governs land ownership and generally restricts foreigners from owning land directly.
Okay, the land code.
Second, the Thailand Condominium Act. As we discussed, this is the specific law that enables foreigners to own condo units freehold, and it sets those important 49% foreign ownership quotas.
Condo Act. Got it.
And third, the Civil and Commercial Code. This is the foundational body of law in Thailand that covers contracts in general. So it governs things like lease agreements, mortgages, sales contracts, ensuring they are legally sound and enforceable.
Land Code, Condo Act, Civil and Commercial Code.
Understanding how those three interact is, as the guide implies, super important for anyone involved in a property transaction in Phuket.
So, bringing this all together, what does it really mean for someone dreaming of that Phuket property? It sounds like while it might seem daunting initially, it's definitely achievable if you follow the rules.
Absolutely. It might look like a maze, like you said at the start, but once you understand the paths, condos here, leaseholds there, maybe a company structure for certain situations, it becomes navigable. It's entirely doable.
The core takeaway seems to be condos are generally the most straightforward path for direct foreign ownership. Villas and land usually involve more complex strategies like those long-term leases or maybe company structures.
That's a good summary. And if you connect all this back to the bigger picture, the single most important thread running through all these options, stressed again and again in the Ocean Worldwide Guide, is the absolute necessity of getting sound, independent legal guidance from the outset. Choosing the right legal structure is as important as choosing the right property.
It really makes you think, though. Given these different legal structures, leaseholds, company setups, limited freehold, what does it truly mean to own property? Especially when you see how that definition can change quite dramatically when you cross international borders.
That's a fascinating question. Ownership isn't always absolute, is it?
Exactly. And maybe understanding these different ways property rights are handled in a place like Phuket. How might that shape your own perspective on investment and ownership? Not just for that beautiful beach villa, but perhaps more broadly globally.